Welcome, UCL fans, to the Week 9 review and ranking for the United Championship League. My name is Nintendo Fanatic 64, and I have watched all the matches, crunched the numbers, and I have come up with what I believe is a fair and accurate ranking system. Now, before I get into the rankings, I would like to mention that I am in no way affiliated with the UCL or any of its coaches involved. Now, before we get into the actual rankings, I'm going to go ahead and go over a review of all 8 matches that took place this week. So, starting off, we have the New York Yankees, who have a record of 5-3, taking on the Manchester Magnazones with a record of 0-8. And it was a 3-0 victory for the New York Yankees. MVP of the match goes to Inferne from the New York Yankees, who had 3 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Bronx Beartics, whose record is 6-2, taking on the Carolina Keldios, whose record is 4-4. And it was a 3-0 victory for the Bronx Beartics. MVP of the match goes to Mega Ampharos from the Bronx Beartics, who have 2 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Philadelphia Alligators with a record of 4-4, taking on the Tulsa Talonflames with a record of 5-3. And it was a 3-0 victory for the Philadelphia Alligators. The MVP of the match goes to the Talonflame from the Philadelphia Alligators, who had 2 knockouts this week. Up next, we had the Toronto Tokakis, whose record is 3-5, taking on the St. Louis Rampardos, whose record is 7-1. And it was a 4-0 victory for the St. Louis Rampardos. And the MVP of the match will go to the Mega Metagross from the St. Louis Rampardos, who managed to get 5 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Grand Canyon Greninjas, whose record is 1-7, taking on the South Beach Slow Kings, whose record is 0-8. And it was a 2-0 victory for the South Beach Slow Kings. The MVP of the match goes to Mega Gallade from the South Beach Slow Kings, who had 2 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Tucson Terrakions, whose record is 7-1, taking on the Long Island Reggie Rockies, whose record was 4-4. And it was a 2-0 victory for the Long Island Reggie Rockies. The MVP of the match goes to Delphox from the Long Island Reggie Rockies, who had 3 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Pittsburgh Pichus, whose record is 4-4, taking on the Bristol City Blazekins, whose record is 3-5, and it was a 1-0 victory for the Bristol City Blazekins. MVP of the match goes to Entei from the Pittsburgh Pichus, who managed to get 3 knockouts this week, and with special honorable mentions going to Ambipom from the Bristol City Blazekins, who managed to get 2 knockouts. And in the final match of the week, we have the Durham Druddigons, whose record is 5-3, taking on the Newcastle Nido Kings, whose record is 6-2. And it was a 5-3 victory for the Newcastle Nido Kings after the Durham Druddigons forfeited the match. The MVP of the match goes to Slowbro from the Newcastle Nido Kings, who managed to get 2 knockouts before the Durham Druddigons forfeited. It was actually due to the Slowbro, which is what caused the Durham Druddigons to forfeit in the first place. He knew that he was not going to win as long as Slowbro was on there, and he had nothing else left to take it out. So, that's the results of what happened this past week. Now we're going to go ahead and move on into the rankings. Now, with the rankings, I have a system where a team earns a point every time they knock out an opponent's Pokemon. They lose a point every time one of their own Pokemon gets knocked out. Now, they have to be responsible for knocking out the opponent's Pokemon if a Pokemon faints due to like a move like Final Gambit, Explosion, Self-Destruct, or due to any recoil damage. The opposing team will not earn a point for that Pokemon's knockout. But the team who uses that move will still have will still lose a point for that week. So, we're going to go ahead and go into this now. At number 16, we have the Manchester Magnazones, whose record is now 0-9 and have a score of -38. At number 15, we have the South Beach Slow Kings, whose record is now 1-8 and has a score of -24. At number 14, we have the Grand Canyon Greninjas, whose record is 1-8 and a score of -19. At number 13, we have the Carolina Keldios, whose record is 4-5 and have a score of -11. At number 12, we have the Toronto Tokakis, whose record is 3-6 and a score of -9. At number 11, we have the Bristol City Blazekins with a record of 4-5 and a score of -7. At number 10, we have the Tulsa Talon Flames with a record of 5-4 and a score of 0 right now. At number 9, we have the Long Island Reggie Rockies, whose record is 5-4 and have a score of 1. At number 8, we have the Pittsburgh Pichus, whose record is 4-5 with a score of 3. Up next, we have the Philadelphia Feraligators at number 7 with a record of 5-4 and a score of 3. At number 6, we have the Durham Druttiguns, whose record is 5-4 and they now have a score of 7. At number 5, we have the Bronx Bearticks, whose record is 7-2 and have a score of 9. At number 4, we have the New York Yankees, whose record is 6-3 and a score of 11. In the third spot, we have the Tucson Terrakions with a record of 7-2 and a score of 12. The number 2 spot goes to the Newcastle Nido-Kings, whose record is 7-2 and have a score of 16. And in first place, and will probably be there for a long time, the St. Louis Rampardos, whose record is 8-1, but have a score of 23. So, I think it's fair to say, with the remaining 6 weeks that are left in the season, the St. Louis Rampardos will probably make it into the playoffs. There is a very unlikely chance that they will not make it in, unless, of course, they have a 0-6. They have the 6 straight losses with an 0-6 on each of them. I don't foresee that happening, but you never know, it will happen in this league. He still has some tough opponents ahead of him. So that's going to do it for this week's ranking and review. If you enjoyed it, please leave it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments section below who you are rooting for this season. And I will be back next week with another of my reviews and rankings. Take care and have a good night.